Our first speaker is Pauline Tully, our Vice Chair. Okay.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good morning, Minister. And just to say, yes, that discussion we had last week, I went back to the student and he said after much fighting with the college it has been resolved that he's getting the second PA, which is good news because he was actually thinking of withdrawing from the course, which would have been awful pity. But he said he's had bad experiences right throughout second level and thought it was going to happen again. But it's been resolved. But he did point out, and it was one of the other issues I mentioned last week, that while you're given a PA in college, you're not given assistance outside of it to actually, to do your study and your work, especially if you're living away from home. If you're living at home, if you're lucky enough to be beside your further education centre, you may have a PA. I suppose the other thing that was mentioned to me by a number of students is what you talked about, part-time and flexibility. So that's something that we would welcome, because a lot of people we've had in here, given their lived experience, would say that it's difficult to take on a full-time course. It could be financial reasons, or it could also be that for physical reasons, people who have chronic pain may not always be able to attend every day. So other options, or even to look at people having a blended option of maybe connecting virtually as well. Exam time, excuse me, students with disabilities are often given maybe 10-15 minutes extra per exam, but that doesn't take into account their needs and it's often not sufficient, and they're arguing that excuse me, that exam accommodations should be based on need rather than just a standard. And the chairperson and I think both separately met a young girl yesterday who is blind, and she's just at her junior cert, and she did have a meeting with Minister Madigan and Minister Rabbit as well. But she has lived experiences of the problems she encountered during junior cert, and I think it would be very valuable to talk to people like Niamh that was in yesterday and others who have gone through exams, junior cert, leaving cert, or college-based, to find out what their needs are. I think that would be important. I welcome the fact that you mentioned training for staff, because students sometimes say that they are often made feel uncomfortable when they highlight their needs, so that would be good. But it's also been brought up that there are insufficient financial and health-related supports for students, that maybe additional funding for the here and there programmes, but also mental health supports within college for disabled students, and that there's no diagnostic service required to access disability supports for adults, or they are, but they have to pay for them privately and they often can't afford them. So in order to be able to avail of supports, they have to be diagnosed in the first place. Something that maybe was mentioned to me as well, that there should be specific career guidance for disabled students at both second level and third level, to help them navigate, because there's often an assumption, especially with students with intellectual disabilities, that they're just going to go into day centre. And so, as you say, we need to broaden how we look at things like that and have more inclusivity. Also, that disability officers should have lived experience, disability officers within third level, because they'll have a better understanding and maybe we support students to advocate for themselves. And just to ask you as well, Minister, has there been consultation with DPOs on all the work that you're doing, which is very commendable, what you've talked about there, the National Access Plan, etc. But has there been work, as I said, the UNCRPD is all about nothing about us without us, so it would be important that there is, and that there's cross-departmental planning and cooperation. So thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Tully, and I know your genuine interest in a lot of these issues you raise. I'm pleased to hear that individual's issue was resolved. I'm still frustrated that it occurred, because the entire issue of the fund for students with disabilities is that it really is meant to be student-centred. That's generally been the feedback I get, but if that person would like to relay their experience to me, I'd be happy to take that up. I'm also intending to pursue the issue that you raised with me and that you mentioned again this morning in relation to, you could have a personal assistant in college. That's great. I think that largely works quite well, but if you want to go for a cup of coffee off campus with your college students, the PA can't come with you, because this was an issue brought to my attention. So it doesn't seem right to me that that's the way. So I will come back to you and come back to the committee on that. In relation to the part-time piece, just to acknowledge the fact that I think we're all on the same page on this. I mean, I should have probably said in my opening statement, the fund for the FSD fund and the student assistance fund are both part-time students are eligible for funding in relation to that. So just to share with the committee figures, we had 569 part-time students receive funding under the Fund for Students with Disabilities, and we had 1,242 part-time students receive funding under the Student Assistance Fund. So that's good that those two are available. The bit we have to do now that we haven't yet done is the bit around Susie, and it is a key recommendation of the review that I published in May, I think, that part-time needs to be funded. You need to be eligible for Susie if you're in part-time study. I suppose what I'm suggesting to the committee is I'd like to A, prioritise that piece of work, and I've asked Professor Tom Collins to lead on that, but B, I'd actually like to see even within that if we could prioritise students with a disability as a starting point. I think that could make quite a significant change. I'd be very happy to meet Neve. I noted on social media that she was here yesterday, and I'd be very happy to also meet her. Yes, absolutely, we have engaged, and I'm very proud of the work my department and sector does very extensively with people with disabilities in terms of the not just the writing of the National Access Plan, but also the monitoring of it. So we have a specific structure, committee structure within the department. We've also now begun conversations with students with a disability in postgrad. Dr. Vivian Rath may be known to this committee, very, very excellent advocate, and he's been meeting me and bringing together other students with a disability at postgraduate level. One, I think it's a great source of encouragement for students at undergraduate level, but it's also good that we're now beginning to talk about postgraduate students with a disability and the supports that need to be put in place. So absolutely the nothing without us about us. The specific career guidance piece you've mentioned is core, is key. And if I was to outline the next piece of work, first piece I really wanted to do was get that autistic fund and the fund for students with intellectual disabilities in place, path 4. I'm delighted we've done that. The next piece, I think you've hit the nail on the head, is the transition piece from second level to third level. So I obviously don't have all the responsibility for this, but I do have part of it, what happens in third level. I remember in my time as health minister that a huge discussion takes place every year about the level of funding for daycare places and respite places for what they call school leavers, people with a disability. That's a really important conversation. It seems to be the only one that we have, though. There doesn't seem to be a conversation about, well, actually, what happens to the person when they leave second level education with a disability and wants to access the education system. That was the motivation behind the new Path 4 programme. I think there's a piece of work to be done, and I've spoken to Minister Madigan on this, Minister Rabbitt, Minister Foley. We need to do a piece of work around the transition planning and the career guidance piece. So very happy to work with the committee on this, very happy to also get input from the committee in relation to that. So I'll come back to you on that also.